You've probably heard of leaky gut, but have you heard of leaky brain? That's the conversation we're going to have on today's podcast episode. Welcome to Unshakable Brain, your guide to an unshakable brain. I'm Dr. Kylie, your host, and my mission is simple to help you grow a brain that's stronger, sharper, and unshakable in every part of your life. Each week, we explore the science, stories, and strategies to make that happen. This episode is brought to you by Dr. Rewire's Brain DNA Test. Find out more at unshakablebrain.ai. All right, leaky brain, here we go. Today's special guest is LaKrista. Odell, right?
Yes.
Okay, just pause for a second. Like, it's LaKrista Odell. She runs not one, but two offices in Oklahoma. So if you are in the Oklahoma region, I highly suggest going to visit her. Today, we're going to discuss leaky gut, leaky brain. But first, LaKrista, tell us a little bit about your past and where you've been and why you're doing what you're doing now.
So I am a registered nurse. I feel like a lot of us have like our own story of how we ended up in functional medicine. It's always, my story is very similar to everybody else's. I was very sick and you go to all the specialists, you do all the things and you just continue to get worse and you don't ever find out like what's causing this. And they don't want to find what's causing it. They just think, oh, some people just have high blood pressure. You just get arthritis. You just get heart disease. The Western medical system isn't digging in. Why are these things happening? Your body is not designed to attack you. Everything happens for a reason. It's danger signals. It's trying to set off alarm bells. It's trying to tell you something's wrong. And so through my own journey, I ended up being introduced to applied kinesiology, which is a form of muscle testing that works through frequencies to really determine where there's nutritional deficiencies, toxicities, mitochondrial breakdown, parasites, bacteria, any kind of pathogen, mold exposure, that sort of thing. And it healed me not once but twice before I finally realized I probably needed to leave the medical system. The first time I was 17, and we actually had a gas leak in my house, and I was the only one
Dear.
that was sick. Found out later that I had MTHFR mutation. So that's when I was the only one that was sick. I wasn't able to detox properly. And then by the time I was 27, I had been diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and was just like not getting better and was living on steroids. And finally when I got pregnant, I had to stop all my medication, obviously declined very quickly and ended up in the hands of another muscle tester. And it was the same story. I was like, these are the only people that are helping. I don't understand why this is a last resort. And so my mission is really make it not a last resort. Root cause medicine should be a first resort. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. And the more people we help, the more severe cases that we get. So we have to keep expanding and adding. And now we do ozone and peptides and, CBD IVs and, ride therapy, all the things, because there are some cases where people get so far along where supplements are not going to be quite enough to get them back where we need to, want them to be. So, yeah. So just due to demand, now we have another location and had to add some more aggressive therapies in there. But yeah, I absolutely love it. And it's crazy that you get to go to work every day and it doesn't feel like work.
That's good. That's good. I actually received an email from, he's the lab director of a hospital. I can't remember in what state, but in a hospital, and he's trying to get the MDs in their healthcare vicinity, not just in the hospital, but all of the local areas, to incorporate more functional medicine labs. And he was wondering, I don't even know how he found my information, but he found my information because I'm the blood work girl in my past.
Right.
Now I'm turning to be more brain functioning and unshakable brain stuff. But I thought it was cool how he is the head of a lab in a hospital trying to incorporate more functional medicine labs and get MDs on board.
What's
So I
crazy
sent him
is,
over to virtualclinic.md because I know them really well. And
yeah.
I'm like, look, the MD is the one who owns this. So that will help the other MDs
Right, right.
get on board with it. So
I mean, it's
I feel like it's coming.
pretty common that, we see a lot of chiropractors because they're more natural minded, but it's crazy. We see a lot of nurses. I mean, a lot of nurses, and they're the ones in the hospital, and they're like, I can't work here anymore. I can't do this. And so we're getting lots of nurse practitioners. Now we're seeing MDs, DOs, and I'm like, when you're coming to us and going like, I can't fix myself. I don't know what's wrong. Teach me what's happening. And then they're going back out and they're like, how do you continue to work in this broken system? Because then they're seeing the roadblocks that insurance companies are putting up, and they can see after they learn how to heal, they can see the money gain. And it's really hard because you want to help people. And so some people stay in the trenches because they're like, now I can at least direct my people, and do more, add some supplements and lifestyle modifications and have direct them out to do more functional lab testing, but it's all out of pocket. And so, but some of them are like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't work in this
Yeah.
system. And so it's really sad that our environment has just become very toxic. Our food, lots of mold, glyphosate. It's very hard to stay healthy in America. It's if you're not holistic minded and doing these things, it's very, very hard to stay well, into your older age. We decline much quicker here because of our toxicity exposure.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of toxicity, leaky gut,
Yes.
we've all heard of it, I'm sure. But then you've got leaky brain too. Explain to us first leaky gut and then how that incorporates into leaky brain.
So, like you said, speaking of the toxins, leaky gut is so prominent. I have one of the tests that I like to do has like a leaky gut score on it. And I've never ran it on somebody that's been in the green except for my kids. And I'm only saying that because I don't typically run it on kids because I don't like to do blood work on kids. We just try to stick with muscle testing. But of course, with my kids, I'm like, I want to see where everything's at. They've had zero antibiotics. They haven't had any vaccinations, and they were still borderline on the moderate, like still in the green, close to the yellow. So that just shows even like working, trying to stay healthy and knowing the things I know. My two youngest, of course, my two oldest, I didn't know they were vaccinated and grew up, on frozen foods and processed foods and all the things. But most people are in the red on a leaky gut score. And so the reason is we have the highest vaccination rate in the country. Our kids get over 80 vaccinations by the time they're 18 if they follow the regular schedule, which is absurd.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. So what happens is these toxins cause inflammation throughout the whole body. And so the tight junctions that are in our gut, they're supposed to be like tight together. They start to open up. And so then undigested food and other things that should stay in the gut can leak out and cause inflammation through our whole body. Other contributors, like I said, antibiotics and steroids are huge. Antacids, those are horrible on the gut, cause leaky gut as well. Sugar, processed foods, gluten. Our flour is so far removed from traditional grain. We've actually just recently
I like
started.
the way you said that. So far removed from
Yeah.
traditional grain.
Yeah. So we actually got some organic ancient grain and we actually mill it at home and make our own flour. And my kids think it's so fun. We recently changed the recipe that we had. It's always been sourdough. So we always use sourdough, but we actually changed our sourdough to fresh milled flour instead of buying, like the organic unbleached flour. It still doesn't have any nutrients. It's just flour. Like there's no nutrient density to it. We switched to fresh milled, and I only switched 30% of the flour in this recipe because I was like, I didn't know fresh milled flour is so different, when you use it to cook. And my daughter, who normally doesn't eat their little sourdough muffins, ate like 4 of them. And she's like, these almost taste like a cookie because it had so much flavor. And I only switched 30% of the flour, and this was just last week. And so now we're slowly transitioning all of our flour over to fresh milled flour because gluten is terrible. And I tell people, like, it's not really the gluten sensitivity. It's the flour in our country. So we started with pine corn, and then they start hybridizing these grains to make them grow faster and where they could actually process them when they're a shorter plant it initially started, to make sure that they could actually feed everybody in droughts and things like that. But it just kept continuing. And so now
That's big business.
it's such a difficult protein to break down. If you buy any flour from the store, it's going to cause inflammation in the gut. So if you can't get fresh milled sourdough grains and bread from somebody and you can't make it yourself, I just stay away from gluten. So another one that people don't think of is stress and not getting enough sleep. Those will actually cause leaky gut. All of those hormones work together. So those are really the main things. How that connects to your brain is your gut is your second brain. I always like to use an analogy, like almost everyone is pretty well aware if you give a kid like lots of sugar and dye, like you should give them a bag of Skittles or something, most kids are going to like lose their mind. They're not going to be able to pay attention. They're going to have behavioral issues. Like dye and sugar make kids crazy. And most people are pretty on board with that now. Most people can see the difference in their kids when they remove that. And so the fact that you're eating that and it makes their brain like literally on fire, like their neurotransmitters are just going crazy. That's the gut brain connection. What you're eating is directly affecting your brain. Whether your gut is healed or not is directly affecting the production of neurotransmitters, and then also the methylation factors too. So like, if you have neurotransmitters as they break down and methylate and transfer to other neurotransmitters, if you can't make that process happen, you may have too much of an excitatory neurotransmitter and not enough of a calming one. And kids will get tics and dystonia and tremors and things like that because they don't have enough GABA or some, calming neurotransmitters. So that can be a problem too. And so for kids, I always say cut out gluten, dyes, and sugar and make a massive difference if you have kids with autism, ADHD, behavioral issues, anything that could be, neurological. That's really going to be probably the first thing that I would recommend. Other signs to look for, like if you're not sure if your kid has leaky gut, they probably do. Other signs to
If
look
they live
for,
in America, just assume it.
right? It's kind of like, do you have parasites? Yes, you do. Eczema is a really big one. So your skin is going to directly reflect your gut health as well. If they have constipation, they probably, or diarrhea or back and forth, like they just don't have regular bowel movements. They complain of tummy aches. And then if they have any of those neurological symptoms, those are all really good signs that you could probably guarantee they've got some leaky gut going on. So
Yeah, for me and my two girls, we don't do dairy. My husband doesn't do dairy either. And for some reason, Easton's the only one that does. And on small amounts. So it's like I get him the milk because he's allergic to nuts. So it's like we gotta
yeah,
transition. But like I'll notice with Hallie, I just wrote on my notes here, like I need to buy more enzymes for Hallie. We ran out of enzymes for her. And she'll be like, Mom, my tummy hurts. I'm like, okay, well, have you gone to the bathroom? What have you eaten? And the enzymes really help. I am not perfect in my gluten. I am not perfect in my sugar, and I am not perfect in my dyes. So
yeah.
I will help them in other ways as I can. But so your mom out there are people like LaKrista who is I don't know how she does it all, where she's running two brick and mortar practices, plus making all these homemade delicious things for her kids. And I am not a baker. I I have a great kitchen, but it's not the place I want to be cooking and baking.
Well,
So
we homeschool, and so it's a lot of times we use that as part of our lesson. Like we don't, we try to stay away from, I won't say we won't eat processed dairy. We try to stay away from pasteurized and processed dairy, but we get raw milk from a dairy farm. And so
uh,
dairy itself isn't really inflammatory. There are people who are lactose intolerant, but most people, dairy is not inflammatory if you get raw dairy. It's got the bacteria and the enzymes in the milk to break it down. And so then it's very easy. Like my kids can do it. We heat up the milk, add a little apple cider vinegar, it separates. You can make cottage cheese, mozzarella cheese, all of that. And so that's just usually part of their little lessons. They know how to feed the sourdough starter. They mix their own muffins. And so there's good life skills. And I was talking to a client the other day and she said, the reason parents are having trouble raising their kids is because they're not asking their parents for help and they're not asking their grandparents for help. And we're losing generational information. And so all the way back, my mom, my grandma, and my great grandma, none of them cooked on my mom's side. on my grandma or my grandma's side. On my dad's side, had a very good cook. My grandma unfortunately passed away when I was younger, so I didn't get any of that information. So I'm really trying to self-teach to make sure I pass that down, because when I was in college, it was so crazy. I was raised on, hamburger helper and grilled cheese and hot dogs, and I didn't know how to make bread. Like, I didn't know anything about yeast, making bread rise. I'd never heard of sourdough. I didn't know you could make your own noodles. We didn't know how to process our own meat, like none of that. And so it was so crazy to me that I want my kids to know that, like, that is how we're supposed to eat. We made liver, like chicken livers the other night, and told my kids what they were. And they were like, what is this? Because liver is like the most abundant in nutrients. And so we actually
Oh yeah.
puree it and then mix a little bit of it with like our ground beef so that they get the liver instead of, they do take beef organic capsules as well. But yeah, I mean, changing a diet back to the traditional diet can literally just start the healing process. That is something every time you eat, I tell my clients, you're either poisoning your body or you're healing it every time you eat. So that, and you can't always choose the best thing. There's always a better alternative. If you're out in a restaurant, there's always one alternative that's better. The grilled chicken might be cooked in canola oil, but at least it's not deep fried with, gluten or whatever. So
The
I
fry,
like
yeah,
the
that's right on the
best
back outside of
decision.
it.
We've talked about 80/20. We talk about 80/20 a lot.
Good, better, best. That's another
Yep.
rule too.
Yes, for
For
sure.
not just your kids, but for yourself as well. Like we got
Yeah.
to give ourselves grace as well. So, okay, that's how leaky gut occurs.
Mhm.
Same thing if it's happening in your gut, it's happening in your brain.
So where your gut lining breaks down, you also in the brain, it's the blood-brain barrier. So everybody's heard of the blood-brain barrier. It's supposed to be kind of like, I mean, imagine like a privacy fence. The slats are really close together. But you can still get some things through, just not very much. So
I
the
haven't heard
blood-brain
of
barrier,
that
the blood,
correlation before. That's a good one with
yeah,
the privacy fence. That makes
yeah.
so much sense.
So it's, there's supposed to be very tiny openings, and it's designed where the opening's big enough where only the nutrients and water and things that need to get through can get through. But what happens a lot of times is, inflammation, toxins, all of those things can make those openings a little bit wider. One thing that happens a lot of times is if kids have eczema or allergies and they get histamine. So the purpose of histamine is to open up the blood vessels to get so that more immune cells can get in to heal it. So everything in our body, like I said, happens for a reason. But it also, sometimes if it's chronic or long term, then that's when the injury to the body starts to happen. So histamine comes in with allergies or eczema, or you just get sick or something. These blood vessels open up, the blood-brain barrier opens up to try to get more immune cells in. But then when this is chronic, then bacteria, toxins, medications, dyes and sugar, all of this stuff starts to get into the brain because your blood-brain barriers opened up because your histamine levels are high. So we've heard of like mast cell activation syndrome. This is just like chronic histamine elevation. Your mast cells are just pumping out this histamine. So that is another issue too. So if people have autoimmunity of any sort, any kind of autoimmune disease, they most likely have leaky brain. And so that's something that you always have to heal the gut, but you also need to heal the brain. Healing the brain's hard because you've got to sleep. You have to sleep. And that's also, we're like chronic insomnia in this country. Nobody
As
can't
I
sleep
woke
and
up
nobody
this morning
wants to
on the
sleep.
couch because my little 2-year-old came into the bedroom who still hasn't slept. She slept through the night one time in her entire life.
Oh my gosh.
So when she came into the room last night, I'm like, "Oh, just lift her up." But between my husband, who likes to take up a lot of space, claims it's his broad shoulders, I'm just like, forget it. You two can go in the bed. I will go sleep on the couch.
What we see a lot too is, I mean, think about it, there's a lot of kids that have neurological issues that don't sleep well. And so, finding ways through like magnesium or even microdosing melatonin and things to get them to sleep. But something that's really interesting is there's a lot of conditions where I say, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, that kind of thing. So with, say, autism and ADHD, there were some post-mortem studies that they did on the brain where they found spirochetes from Lyme's disease in the brain of autistic kids.
Oh, gosh.
And I can't remember if the study was on neurological conditions in general, things like maybe Parkinson's, ADHD, and autism, but I specifically was studying about autism, so I remember that specifically. But they were finding spirochetes in the brain post-mortem, so after these people had passed away. And so the question was, did the Lyme's disease come in because the blood-brain barrier was leaky? Obviously, it had to be leaky to some degree for that to get in. Or once the bacteria got in, is that what triggered the autism? Was Lyme's disease in the brain? So we know about heavy metals. We know heavy metals can trigger that. That's another finding postmortem, or high aluminum. We see this with Alzheimer's as well. But the spirochetes in the brain was very interesting because they were like, okay, was the blood-brain barrier leaky already? This bacteria comes in and then they have these problems. What I will say is bacteria is very difficult to detox from the brain. When we start detoxing these kids, their symptoms usually get worse before they get better. They'll start having more behavioral problems. They'll start stimming. They'll start having accidents. I actually just was messaging with a mom just about an hour ago. We started her daughter on a detox, and she's been detoxing for a while, but we really kind of cranked it up and added a blend that has some cilantro in there. It just helps pull some heavy metals. But she's been on, zeolites and binders and stuff in the past, but this one specifically just really triggered some things for her. She started stimming and having accidents, which is, typical regression with a detox reaction in an autistic kiddo. And so we just pulled her back on the supplement. We were, she was just detoxing a little bit too fast. But that just shows that if you have a neurological condition and your brain's leaky, post-mortem, they're finding all of this stuff in the brain that should have never gotten in. And so a lot of us walk around all day with leaky brain. So that's what they're trying to determine is like, they have leaky brain, maybe they have a little ADHD, a little brain fog. Is it once the bacteria comes in that they're getting the full-blown autism? Is it the heavy metals? Or is it that this stuff was, it was already there before? And so that's kind of what they're trying to determine. But the mitochondria function is another thing that with the brain is our brain's only 2% of our body weight, but it uses 20% of our ATP that's produced. So it's a very high energetic organ. And so if your ATP or your mitochondria cellular function is low, your brain cannot work like it needs to. And so that's really important. We work, and I talk with my clients all about mitochondria and ATP production and ways to keep that up because, and sleep and exercise and sunlight and all of that's really important because that's how we charge our battery. Our mitochondria are our batteries. That's how we charge them. People aren't, we look at screens all day. We don't ever get natural sunlight. So red light therapy is really great. Like I leave my house most of the time. I leave my house before the sun's up. So we use like a 10,000 lux lamp. We use a loom box for red light. We use all these things to keep our mitochondria function up and keep our circadian rhythm set because it's just the way that we live. We're not out. I mean, there are times on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where we're outside, but through the week, we just aren't exposed to those things. And
Well,
so,
especially when the time's about to change and it's going to
yes,
now get dark at 5:30.
yes, for sure.
Like, we live in 2025. Seriously.
Yes, for sure.
One of my biggest pet peeves that still exists. So, just to recap here, we got a couple of different things that you've said about healing the brain. One, mitochondria and the ATP production. I go back to high school and I think in high school we did those cellular modules where you put like one mitochondria on the cell, and
Yeah,
that's totally not reality. Thousands and thousands of mitochondria inside every single cell in our body, and that mitochondria is responsible for producing ATP.
yeah,
Go back to high school again, and you think about the Krebs cycle, and the Krebs cycle is taking proteins, fats, and carbohydrates and converting that into the ATP for your energy. It all happens in the mitochondria. So a little bit about what mitochondria is. R is the appropriate term. You've said you can't heal the brain without sleep. One day I'm going to sleep through the night. I don't know when, but one day. And then red light therapy. Is there like a home unit that you suggest for red light therapy?
I like the limb box just because they're portable and they're small. That's typically the one. I'm going to have to actually order a second one. My son moved to college. He's a football player. And so he has taken my limb box for all of his injuries. And I have not seen it since he moved out. So we're going to have to get another one because my little kids love it. When they get sick,
You
it's
have
like,
a link for that?
yeah, yeah. On my Instagram, I've got a link tree that has all my
Will you
links.
shoot it over to me and then I'll post it in the show notes?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure it's there an affiliate fee to it. Like you might as well get some.
Yeah, I love the limb box. That's one thing that I recommend to a lot of my clients as well. We use limb box, like I said, until my son ran off with it when he got his first college football injury. We use it all the time.
Okay. Super, super golden information here. Talking about leaky gut, leaky brain, and how they are interchangeable almost, practically, anyways. LaKrista, share with us a story or two about what you've seen individuals go through and their outcomes.
Like I said, I mean, the most prominent ones that I probably work with are autistic kids. And there's, a huge misconception that this cannot be reversed. And in all cases, I will say complete reversal. There are a lot of cases where I'm not going to say that's not possible. We haven't gotten there yet, is what I'll say, because we are going to stay hopeful and we know that these kids have come a long ways. But we've had several kids who tested on the spectrum and then they retake the test and they're not on the spectrum anymore. So for some reason, a lot of people in this community, I made a post about this one time with a little boy who came in and had just redone his test. He was no longer on the spectrum. He didn't have an IEP at school. He was sitting in normal class. You would never know that this kid had been diagnosed with autism. We made a post and I didn't say, we had reversed his autism. I didn't say any of that. I just said he had tested on the spectrum. 2 years later, he's off the spectrum on as far as his test is concerned. And it went crazy. These people were pissed. Like you can community. And I'm like, wow, like why would you not want to offer some hope? Like I'm seeing this with my own eyes every day. We're they're not talking and we start detoxing them and ramping up their mitochondria and they just start spilling words. Like within a week, these kids are talking, and that's not always the case, but that happens a lot of the time. And it's like, it's amazing. And so we have to really be careful about how much we talk about that, but
You're challenging beliefs, and
yes,
people don't like their belief challenged.
and a lot of the times I think these people know deep down that it could potentially have been the vaccine injury. Like they saw this happen. And I think a lot of it is, maybe some subconscious guilt. And they don't want to admit that an action on their part could have potentially caused this. And I understand that. But also, I think, digging deep and discovering that there are side effects to everything. And instead of taking your platform and your situation and your story to educate other people so it doesn't happen to other kids is a much stronger way to go than to just suppress it. And I feel like that is the case because the moms that come out and speak about their child's situation, they are like, it's crazy that people don't want to. I'm going to talk about my kids' progress. I'm going to talk about their condition. I'm going to tell people their story. And by doing that, they're able to help other people and they're giving them options. But yeah, I mean, it's very rewarding to see. And like I said, even changing these kids' diet, getting dairy and gluten out of their diet temporarily. It's crazy. In the gut of autistic kids, there's a book that's called Healing the Symptoms Known as Autism. It is not being published anymore. I bought my copy. It was over $300.
Surprise.
It was over $300 on eBay because there aren't very many copies and it had been pulled down. And in this book, it talks about a study where in the gut of a typical autistic kid, because the gut microbiome is so disrupted, these kids almost always have gut issues, leaky gut, leaky brain, that when they eat gluten and dairy, it turns into a chemical that is similar to morphine. And so they're literally walking around feeling like they're high. And so when you cut that out of their diet, their brain starts to come into focus. and it will dramatically change their behaviors. And these parents are like, well, this is all we'll eat. And I'm like, you have to start changing things one thing at a time. Like, you've got to start exposing them. And I know it's hard. And I know we all, we work and we're busy. But you wouldn't give your kid morphine. You've got to find alternatives. There's so many alternatives. And so we'll just start, if they only eat chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese, let's find a gluten-free macaroni. Let's just start there. You might have to try 16 different brands of gluten-free macaroni and cheese. I don't even care if it's in the box. Get it gluten-free, and then we'll switch chicken nuggets. Cook them differently, cook them in the oven, don't cook them in the microwave, vice versa. I don't even care if it's microwave, I don't care if it's processed. Work on those very small transitions, especially if they're only eating 3 or 4 foods. If you could switch 2 of them, you've changed 50% of their diet. And so we make really slow changes, and I don't have like unrealistic expectations. I don't expect
But
everybody to do the
those
things
are
that we do.
doable shifts.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
not saying cut this out, eat this whole brand new food. Like, no, if they're gonna eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, then just get the best version of
Yeah.
them,
I mean, like I
not
said,
the
we
good
mill
version.
our own flour and drink raw milk and make our own cheese. I'm not asking people to do that. I live that way because I feel like that's important to give my kids, that kind of diet. And we homeschool and it's education for them.
I
But
think it's cool.
I
I
don't expect
remember
that.
when you were talking about the raw milk, I come from a family of dairy farmers in
Yeah.
central Utah. And growing up, we would just go get milk from the pasture.
Yeah.
And then somebody along the lines told my grandma that we couldn't, had to be processed, so we couldn't do that anymore. And that
Yeah.
was like probably when I was a teenager, so 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And now they've since
So
passed. But I remember those days growing up where we just went out to the farm and grabbed our milk.
a little backstory on that. So I always tell people Louis Pasteur, so his last name is Pasteur. That's where the word pasteurized comes
Yes.
from. Louis Pasteur was a fraud. And he admitted on his deathbed that all of his research was altered and that he was never able to fulfill Cook's postulates, where it's you identify the bacteria in the milk, you give it to somebody, they get sick, and then you identify it in the stool. So they have to, it has to pass through. He was never able to fulfill that, proving causation. And he lied and said that he did because he couldn't admit that he was wrong. And so that completely, that could go into the whole germ theory versus terrain theory. They've never been able to prove that taking a virus into your body actually causes symptoms, or bacteria. Bacteria is nature's natural biodegraders. It breaks down, it eats dead tissue. So if you have an area of injury or inflammation, bacteria comes in to clean that area up. If you take antibiotics and kill out the bacteria, then that area stays inflamed. That can lead to disease and autoimmunity and cancer. You want that bacteria there. You just want to support your body through the healing process. People have to understand our bodies know what they're doing. We need to support it,
Completely.
not try to stop it and reroute it, because by doing that, you're causing more damage.
When it comes to research, I went to Western States in Portland, Oregon for my chiropractic degree. And they're a very evidence-based, research-based school, complete opposite of life. And you know, we had this little professor. I think he had little man syndrome because he was like 5'2" and walked around campus like he owned the place, and people were intimidated by him because of that little man syndrome. And he was the one that always cranked down on research and research and research. And I'm like, look, someone has to pay for the research, for one.
Yeah,
Two, you can find research backing up anything you want to find it on.
follow the money.
It's the money. Like I was a rebel even in school. I'm just like, you can, yeah, give me some research, but I
Yeah,
want to know all the background behind, like, why did they even do the research? Because there's still motivation for them behind that. And then, of course, we have the Tylenol research that came out, and
Coca-Cola
that's,
funds more food research than any other company, I think. It's like Coca-Cola and who's the other one? I don't know, like one of the other like candy company. It's like they're the biggest companies and they're funding all the food research. Like, you think they're not, that research isn't biased? Like, you're
yeah,
kidding me. They also told us canola oil was safe. Like, what are we doing?
yeah. So take your research with a grain of salt and dive in deeper. There's a reason behind the research. and find
Exactly.
the reason. So don't just jump onto ChatGPT and let it pull from its main source of Reddit and provide you everything that you think you are wanting. Anyways, just so you all know, that is LaKrista Odell. She was once a registered nurse. So if you're feeling intimidated by learning something completely new, well, she's done it and she's conquered it and she's helping thousands and millions of other people heal because of that big leap she took. So whatever you're doing in your life, if there's a big leap you're trying to take it. That will help you create an unshakable brain. And I kind of laughed when I invited her on. I said, "You have an unshakable brain." She's like, "No, I don't." Like, I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to being an unshakable brain. If you can do what you do on the socials and do what you do in business and block out all the naysayers, it's unshakable. All right, LaKrista, where can they learn more about you?
Yeah. Yeah. Do what? I missed.
Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah. So nativewellnessllc.com, and then my Instagram is at LaKrista Odell.
Go get the real truth from her Instagram page. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Unshakable brain. If you could go like the podcast, send it to a friend, and leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time.